Hi, I'm Olivia, and I want to share a story with you that might just change how you see life forever. Have you ever felt lost, like you were going down a road with no end in sight? Or maybe you faced a moment so dark that you wondered if you could ever find your way back to the light? This story is for you. You might think you know what it means to be brave, to love, to persevere, but what if I told you there's something even deeper, a strength that comes from within? And what if that strength could be yours right now, just by listening to these words? Stay with me, because this story holds something truly powerful. It isn't just a tale of overcoming hardship or finding purpose. It's about realizing that every moment we live, every breath we take, has the potential to shape us, to mold us, to make us see ourselves in a new way. It's not just a story about someone who triumphed against the odds, but a story that reminds us that within each of us lies a quiet, steadfast strength waiting to be awakened. And yes, there will be suspense, a touch of fear, perhaps even sadness. But there's also boundless hope, the kind that lifts us and gives us courage we didn't know we had. This story has everything: moments that might make you gasp, that might make you hold your breath, and others that may bring a tear to your eye. Life is a journey filled with twists and turns, and it's those unexpected moments, the times when we're tested, that reveal who we truly are. So are you ready to hear it? Are you ready to feel the story, to walk through its shadows and light with me? Then, let's begin. There was a young man named David, a simple name but a complex soul. From a small town in the heart of America, he had dreams bigger than the fields he grew up around. Every evening, he would stand outside his house, staring at the stars, wondering if life held something more for him. He was the kind of person who everyone thought would lead an ordinary life, get a steady job, settle down, and blend into the backdrop of his town. But David's heart burned with a fire he didn't fully understand, a yearning that he couldn't explain to anyone, not even himself. One night, as David was gazing up at the stars, an old man from the town approached him. The man had a strange glint in his eye, something that seemed to carry the wisdom of years and the mystery of the unknown. "Why do you look up at those stars every night?" David, the old man, asked, his voice soft but steady. David was caught off guard. I don't know," he stammered. "Maybe I just want something more, something different." The old man chuckled, a warm, deep sound that felt like a hug on a cold night. "More, you say? Ah, more's a tricky thing, my boy. More can lead you to greatness or take everything you have. Are you willing to risk it?" David felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what he was agreeing to, but his heart was pounding. He nodded, almost instinctively, not realizing that this simple gesture would change his life forever. The old man looked at him closely. "All right then, David. If you want more, you must follow your heart, no matter where it takes you. And remember, the path isn't always kind, but it's always worth it." With that, the old man turned and walked away, leaving David standing alone under the stars, his heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. The next day, David left his hometown. He packed his few belongings and set out with no clear destination, only the promise he had made to himself to find more. Days turned into weeks, and as he traveled, he met people from all walks of life, some who encouraged him, others who doubted him. But he pressed on, guided by that invisible force, that whisper from his soul telling him that there was something he had to discover. Along the way, David faced countless challenges. There were days when he had no food, no shelter, when exhaustion wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. There were nights when fear crept into his heart, and he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. But each time doubt threatened to pull him down, he would remember the old man's words, "The path isn't always kind, but it's always worth it." One rainy night, David found himself in a small village. He was cold, wet, and hungry, and for the first time, he felt like giving up. Just as he was about to turn back, he saw a little girl standing in the rain, barefoot, shivering, and clutching a small, worn-out teddy bear. Her eyes were wide with fear and sadness, and in that moment, something shifted inside David. He approached her, kneeling down to her level, and asked gently, "Are you okay, little one?" She shook her head, her tiny frame trembling. "My mommy, she's sick, and we don't have any money for medicine." David's heart ached. He didn't have much himself, but seeing her, he realized that he couldn't turn away. Digging into his pockets, he found the last few coins he had saved. He placed them in her small hand, and she looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. In that moment, David understood something profound. Sometimes, the more we seek isn't about achieving greatness, but about touching lives, bringing hope to those who have none. As he watched the little girl run back to her mother, a strange warmth filled his heart. It was as if he had found a piece of the more he had been searching for. It wasn't in fame, wealth, or glory, but in the small acts of kindness that ripple through the lives of others. David continued his journey, and with each person he helped, he felt that same warmth, that same sense of purpose. He faced many more challenges, but the fear no longer held him back. He knew that every struggle, every hardship, was leading him closer to the truth of who he was meant to be. And one day, as he looked back on his journey, he realized that the more he had been searching for had been within him all along. David's journey was far from over. After the encounter with the little girl, something inside him felt lighter, as if a weight he hadn't known was there had been lifted. He began to see the world differently, noticing beauty in the simplest things, the way sunlight danced on leaves, the laughter of children playing, the kindness of strangers offering him food and shelter. For the first time, he truly felt connected to the people around him, even if they were strangers. He was no longer just searching for more for himself. He wanted to give something back, to leave a mark that would outlast him. As he wandered from town to town, he began sharing his own story with people he met along the way. He told them about the old man, the promise he had made, and the things he had learned in his travels. To his surprise, people started listening, and some even followed him for a while, drawn by his sincerity and the spark of hope he carried. His journey became more than a solitary quest. It became a movement, a ripple spreading through the lives of everyone he touched. But one evening, while passing through a dense forest on the edge of a mountain, David felt an unease that he hadn't felt before. Shadows crept over the path, the trees whispering secrets he couldn't quite understand. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, and for the first time in months, he felt a pang of fear. Doubt began creeping into his mind, whispering that maybe he was just a fool, that all his efforts were in vain. He wondered if he had been naive to think that kindness and hope could really make a difference in a world so vast and often indifferent. As he walked, lost in thought, he didn't notice the figure approaching from the other side of the path. A woman, wrapped in a tattered shawl, stood in his way. Her face was lined with age, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness that struck him deeply. "Who are you, young man, and why do you walk alone in these woods?" she asked, her voice as gentle as the breeze. David took a breath, gathering his thoughts. "I'm just searching, trying to find meaning, to do something good, something real." The woman smiled, a knowing, bittersweet smile. Meaning is a funny thing. It's elusive, always slipping away when you think you found it. But sometimes, in the moments you least expect, it reveals itself, like a spark in the dark. Her words resonated with him, and he felt a surge of hope. She seemed to understand the struggle he was going through, even though he hadn't spoken much. For a moment, he wondered if she was like the old man from his hometown, a guide, a mentor. He was about to ask her name, but before he could, she took his hand and placed a small, carved stone in his palm. "This stone," she whispered, "is a reminder. It may seem small, but like kindness, it has weight, a purpose. Every time you feel lost or unsure, hold it close and remember why you started this journey." He stared at the stone, its surface cool and smooth against his hand. When he looked up to thank her, the woman was gone. vanished into the shadows as quietly as she had appeared. He called out, his voice echoing through the trees, but there was no answer, only the soft rustling of leaves. Days passed, and David continued to journey, clutching the stone during times of doubt and hardship. And each time he held it, he felt a calmness wash over him, as if the weight of the stone grounded him, anchoring him to his purpose. He came to believe that maybe, just maybe, this stone was a gift, not just from the mysterious woman, but from every person he had helped along the way. Months turned into years, and David's story grew. The people he had once helped were now helping others, carrying his kindness forward. Towns he had passed through remembered him and spoke of the wanderer with the stone, a man who had touched their lives with simple but powerful acts of compassion. David was no longer just one man on a journey. He had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always a way to make a difference. But the world, as it often does, had more trials in store for him. One winter, David found himself in a bustling city, filled with noise and lights, but strangely empty of warmth. He saw people rushing about, their faces tense, their eyes filled with worry. He tried to speak to a few of them, sharing his story as he had in other places, but most people brushed him off, too busy or skeptical to listen. The city felt cold, not just from the winter chill, but from something deeper, a feeling of isolation that seemed to grip every soul he encountered. One evening, as he sat alone by a fountain in the city square, he felt that familiar ache of doubt return. Maybe I don't belong here, he thought, feeling small and out of place. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed a little boy watching him from a distance, his eyes wide with curiosity. David smiled, waving him over, and the boy cautiously approached, his footsteps hesitant but eager. "What are you doing here, mister?" the boy asked, his voice small but filled with a surprising confidence. David chuckled softly. "I'm just thinking, I guess. Trying to find my way." The boy nodded, as if he understood. "You look sad. My mom always says that when people are sad, they need a friend." David felt a warmth spread through him. This small child, with his innocent wisdom, had managed to lift his spirits with just a few simple words. In that moment, he realized that no matter where he went, there would always be people who needed a friend, someone who could remind them of the kindness in the world. They sat together in silence, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. David felt a strange sense of peace, as if the city had softened, welcoming him in its own way. The little boy stayed with him for a while, sharing stories about his family, his dreams, and the little things that brought him joy. It was a reminder that even in the busiest, most indifferent places, there were still moments of connection, of simple, honest human kindness. The boy eventually left, but David stayed by the fountain, feeling the weight of the stone in his hand. He thought of all the people he had met, all the lives he had touched, and realized that his journey wasn't about finding some grand meaning or destiny. It was about the little moments, the quiet acts of love and kindness that connected people across time and space. And so, with a renewed heart and a spirit, lifted by the simple wisdom of a child, David continued his journey, leaving behind a trail of hope wherever he went. David's journey carried him through many more towns, villages, and cities, each place leaving its own unique mark on his heart. He learned that the world was filled with people searching for connection, for a sense of belonging, and he realized that he didn't have to make grand gestures to bring them comfort. Sometimes, all it took was listening, a warm smile, or a quiet reminder that they were not alone. Years passed, and David's hair grew grayer, his steps slower, but his spirit remained just as strong. He never stopped carrying the small stone the woman had given him, always holding it close during moments of doubt. It became his silent companion, a reminder of the countless lives he had touched and the purpose that had guided him all these years. He had become something of a legend in the places he had visited, known as the Wanderer, a name that echoed in stories told by those he had helped, stories that grew richer and more embellished over time. One autumn evening, David found himself in a peaceful village nestled in a valley. The air was cool, carrying the scent of freshly harvested apples and the warmth of hearth fires burning in the distance. He felt a familiar comfort here, as if the village itself was welcoming him home after years on the road. He found a small bench under a sprawling oak tree, its golden leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, and sat down, feeling a deep sense of peace. As he sat there, he noticed a young woman approach him. She looked hesitant, her eyes filled with a spark of recognition and a hint of reverence. "Are you?" The wanderer, she asked softly, almost as if afraid to disturb him. David chuckled, the sound warm and inviting. "I suppose that's one way to put it. But yes, I think that's me." The woman sat beside him, her expression both nervous and grateful. She told him about her struggles, her dreams, and her doubts, feelings that had once been so familiar to him. She spoke of her fears, her moments of hopelessness, and her yearning to find something more. As she shared her story, David listened patiently, nodding as she poured out her heart. And when she finished, he reached into his pocket and held out the small stone, its smooth surface worn and warm from years of being carried close. "Take this," he said gently, placing it in her hand. "It was given to me long ago by someone who saw the journey I was about to take. This stone has traveled with me through every moment of doubt, every moment of hope. Now, I think it belongs to you." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the stone, feeling its weight, its warmth. She understood that this was more than just a stone. It was a symbol of the journey, the struggles, and the kindness that had carried David through all these years. She thanked him, her voice trembling with emotion, and David saw in her eyes the same spark that had once driven him to set out on his journey. As he watched her walk away, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that the stone and the legacy it carried would live on, guiding others as it had guided him. He realized that he had found the more he had been searching for, not in one grand moment, but in the countless small acts of love and compassion that had connected him to others. With a peaceful smile, David leaned back against the tree, watching the golden leaves dance above him. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on his face, and drifted into a quiet, restful sleep, knowing that his journey had come full circle, leaving behind a legacy of hope and kindness that would continue to inspire others. And so, the legend of the wanderer lived on, his story passed down from person to person, each one touched by his kindness, each one inspired to carry forward the light he had ignited. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the world, a young woman held a small stone in her hand, feeling its warmth and weight, ready to set out on her own journey.